Greetings, ladies and metal gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Beware of Mama, written by Sneaky the Lost. Slastla, the local leader of a Bloodscale gang, was having a busy day. There were 4 blocks being contested by the neighboring Meathook gang, and they'd been seen amassing resources for a push. In response, he'd been moving his crew around to counter their assault. Their shooters were already getting into position, and the locals had already buttoned up. Just as he was making sure his crew had sufficient ammo on them, he saw something that would have made his blood run cold had he not already been endothermic. It was barely a meter tall, upright bipedal simian, skipping along the middle of the road and completely oblivious to its surroundings. A human. Worse, a human juvenile. His crew knew better than to mess with humans. The Denagra incident made it clear that their response to the young being threatened was overwhelming force. Some cartel thought that they could muscle in on a human ambassador by kidnapping their offspring. A Leopard-class dropship and 2 squads of Marines in full power armor proceeded to rescue the child, level the entire region. Then the task force spent the next 3 weeks systematically obliterating every hard asset the cartel had with a series of orbital strikes. They hadn't even asked the government for permission. They'd simply informed the government of what was going to happen. Sla did not want that happening to his crew. Unfortunately, apparently the Meathooks hadn't gotten the memo. Or maybe they thought that they could be blamed the Bloodscales, because they were already setting up a firing position. Sla made a quick, tactical decision. "Cover me!" His second-in-command nodded and pulled his piece, a holdout darter. It was a fairly compact semi-automatic coil gun that fired 15-gram darts at just under the speed of sound. The civilian model it had rolled off the line was a fairly common enough weapon on the frontier worlds, and generally only required licenses to own. This version, however, saw the stock omitted from favor of a pistol grip, saving just over 15 centimeters off the total length, making it compact enough to conceal in civilian clothing. He dashed out across the street, stooping to keep a low profile as he did so. His overcoat flapped behind him. It wasn't entirely for show, as the coat's movement distorted his silhouette to make him at least a little harder to hit. His path brought him to the human youngling, and he snatched the alien up into his arms without slowing down and continued to dash to the alley on the other side of the street. The snarl of plasmacasters echoed down the street behind him, nasty little weapons firing electromagnetic balls containing iron plasma. High energy requirements, and what it did to biological material was sickening, but not the most accurate weapon. 2 more snarls echoed out before he made it to cover. Fortunately, the modified weapons were not noted for their accuracy against moving targets in general, and the users lacked competence to appropriately lead their target. The human child had at first been outraged, but then had been silenced after the first report raced by fear. "What's going on?" it asked him. "Gang shootout. You walked into the middle of it. What are you doing here anyway? Where are your parental units?" Sla responded with his own question. Like most mammals, humans spent a lot of time and energy in gestating and nurturing. It represented a significant investment of resources, likely why they were so protective, which in turn made him wonder why this one was in a neighborhood so far from the human habitation ring. "Mum said she needed to do some routine paperwork on the base, but it was boring. Hey, are those Mark 32 casters?" The child kept trying to peer around the corner and put itself back into the line of fire. Sla pulled her back out of the line of fire again. "What? No, of course not. They're probably a local manufacturer of the same set Feck, with several safeties bypassed. Now stay down." It was odd that a juvenile would instantly assume a weapon was a modern military-issue piece. Granted, the Feck was originally built for military contract, but had become nearly ubiquitous in the decades since its inception. If you wanted a weapon that would horrify your opponents as much as fry them, it was an excellent choice, so long as you could keep it fed. Iron plasma required an absurd amount of energy to produce, but it went through most forms of unsealed body armor with trivial effort. Even if it technically didn't penetrate, all that thermal energy had to go somewhere. Well, he didn't really want to. He had little choice in the moment but to call law enforcement. Granted, they were incompetent slags who were little more than bullies themselves. But the human present changed things. Much as he disliked the slags, he disliked the thought of what humans might do if he didn't report this presence even more. And so, reluctantly, he dialed up the law enforcement hotline on his wristcom. "Thank you for calling emergency services. How may I direct your call?" Synthetic voice answered it in its artificially polite voice. "Law enforcement, emergency, active gunfight, human child present." There was no use arguing or shouting with an automated system, after all. But he gave the buzzwords it needed to appropriately transfer him to someone who could get this ticking bomb out of his hands. "Processing. One moment while I direct." Static cut across the line, followed by a different voice. "I have your positioning coordinates. What is the human child's ident?" The new voice was live, and it was not amused. "Hold one." He looked over at the kid, who was still trying to scramble around the corner for a better look, and asked, "What's your designation?" The child looked back at him in confusion for a moment, then responded, "I'm Sarah McAllister." The kid had spoken into the wristcom. "Ident confirm, current situation." The voice barked from the command. "Pinned down by plasma fire. I'm trying to keep the child out of the line of fire as best I can." Sla responded. "I have eyes on the situation. What is your exact position?" The voice was harsh and gruff. "I'm in the alley about 2 blocks west of the firing position, set up at the intersection of W183 and N32. More snarls of plasma casters blended with the staccato bursts of fire from daughters in the background. "Copy that. Inbound to Mike. Hold position. And do not bother risking yourself engaging. Keeping the civilians safe is your only concern. Do you copy?" Sla wasn't aware that he could get any more nervous than he already was, but he somehow managed. This individual, whoever they were, was using terminology that sounded suspiciously military. Sure, I can do that," he acknowledged, then turned to the child. "Hey, we're backing up, behind the metal dumpster."
"Aw, why? I can't see anything from over there, and it's so gross," the child complained.
"Because we do not want to be caught in the backfire if what I suspect is going to happen is remotely accurate. I will drag you there, or you can walk under your own power. Your choice." He tried taking a firm voice with the child, although it was a bit of a bluff. He didn't dare act like he was accosting the human.
Fine."
The youngling reluctantly followed him to their new position several meters down the alley and behind a large metallic bin that would offer significant cover from the debris and random projectiles. Brrrrt. A harsh noise cut through the din of combat. Whatever it was, it sounded big and dangerous. Sla ducked reflexively and brought an arm around the child as well to cover it. Ka-ping! He felt the noise in his torso cavity, and the pressure wave tossed debris along the alley as whatever it was went past the very supersonic speed down the street. Boom! The explosion down the street was significant to feel the black blast even from his position. Debris was again flung about by the pressure as it sought any available path to least resistance, kicking up small objects and flinging them down the alley. Fortunately, the bin protected them from anything flying around. A very large something cast a shadow from the entrance of the alley, and Sla looked closer. He recognized what could only be a human marine power armor, fully 2 meters and change tall, built to withstand crew-served and vehicle fire, with a rifle that seemed to have been all but ripped off a vehicle somewhere. "Sarah McAllister, where are you?" Sla recognized the voice as the one from the comm.
"Down here, Mummy."
The youngling jumped around him and was surprisingly agile and dashed down the alleyway. Sla's first impulse was to restrain the child, but he checked himself short of that suicidal notion. He also stepped out from cover, hands visible in a no-threat stance. The helmet's visor lifted to reveal a human's face. "Young lady, you are so grounded. I told you not to wander off. How did you even get past the security checkpoint?"
"I told the sergeant at the door that I was going to get some food from the commissary,"
the kid responded. "Okay, but how did you get off the base?" The marine's stern glare intensified.
"Well, they were shuffling around and talking to some lady in a really skimpy clothes, so I kind of, snuck out while they were distracted."
The child seemed to be chagrined, at least trying to mitigate punishment. The marine heaved a heavy sigh. "This is going to be one hell of a sit-rep." The marine seemed to be talking to herself, then addressed Sla directly. "Are you the one that called in?"
"Yes, that was me,"
Sla confirmed. "Who are those jokers with the plasma casters?" The marine's gaze was uncomfortably focused on him. "They call themselves the Meathook Gang. They run everything from that intersection eastward nearly 2 clicks, and claim territory over the industrial hub landing area at the Greens," Sla replied. "Copy that. They just got into our shit list in a big way. I don't care much for any gangs, one way or the other, but when one sees my kid and sees a victim, and the other sees my kid and sees a target, well, one is going to get a lot more direct attention than the other." So, by way of offering my thanks for looking after my child, I'm going to pretend I don't see your guys while we take care of them. Stay off radar, and we won't go looking for you." As the Marine with the anti-tank gun knelt, another passed behind them, carrying a weapon that was side-slung, even for a suit power armor, with far too many barrels in a circular depression around the central rotating axis. "Trust me, after Danagra, no one, at least no one with a functioning brain, wants to get on your radar," Sla replied with a complete honesty. This was apparently amusing to the Marine. "Good to hear. Keep your heads down for the next week or two. We're going to be very busy in this neighborhood to make a clean sweep of things." The sound of a vehicle approached the area. "Ah, good. Sarah, get in the IFE and strap in. We're heading back to base. And if I ever catch you doing a stunt like this again, I'll lock out every—" The voice faded as the Marine escorted a child to the vehicle. Slar took a moment to calm himself and take stock. The meat hooks weren't going to be an issue anymore, it seemed. The Marine stomped off to escort the vehicle. Slar gave them a quarter hour before crossing back to where he'd left his second-in-command. "You're still in one piece after all that, boss. I thought for sure the humans were going to Denagra you." The younger fellow holstered his starter. "Nah, I saved the humans' offspring. It's the meat hooks that are getting the Denagra treatment. Put word out to the boys, hunker down for a couple weeks. We don't want to get caught in the crossfire." Of all the places Slar did not want to be, any human's crossfire was ranked near the top. "Couple of weeks, I don't know if the boys are going to want to take that long. Someone's going to go for the territory. If we don't jump on it first, then we're going to be left short." The doubt in his subordinate's voice was clear. "I'd rather have modest gains than get caught in a human's crosshairs. The humans said 2 weeks. I'm going to follow their advice," Slar replied firmly. "I guess that's why you're the boss. We might lose a couple hotheads, but that's better than getting caught in the middle. I'll pass the word down." His second-in-command was a reliable fellow. Slar could trust him to do what he was told. As the flaming debris of what used to be the meat hooks of defensive firing position continued burning merrily into the afternoon, Slar was grateful that he'd made the call. Their biggest rival was soon going to be the past tense. They could explain after that to include the defensive position they'd been trying to reach for the past couple of quarters, and his people weren't going to have to lift a finger to do it. There was going to be some meeting later, and he was going to need to pass down a reinforcement, just so everyone was crystal clear. You don't mess with the humans, and you especially do not threaten their young. It's just not cost-effective. The humans had a phrase about a mama bear being protective of their children. Slar didn't know what a bear was, but the phrase had been taken up and modified by a multi-racial community. Beware of a mama human. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.